My name is Tilda Warren. I'm 68 years old. I used to run a small cafe on 6th and Alder Street in Eugene, Oregon, the kind of place with handwritten menus and too many stories in the wallpaper. I'm retired now. Widow. Still make tea at 6:15 sharp. Still listen to the same Norah Jones record on Sundays. And until this morning, I thought I still had a family. But at 6:17 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text that changed everything. Don't come to family dinner. We're cutting ties. It's what's best for everyone. From my son, Jason. That was it. No, hi mom. No call. Just that one message, like a blade slipped under a closed door. I stood there, barefoot in my kitchen, holding the tea towel I'd had since Paul was still alive. The kettle was still hissing softly on the stove. And on the counter, my favorite mug waited. The one that says, "World's Best Mom," in faded green letters. Jason gave it to me when he was 10. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I just turned off the stove and poured my tea, hand steady. Then I sat down, stared at that message again, and read it like I was trying to find a second meaning. Like maybe he forgot to add something. He didn't. I opened the family group chat. The message was there, right in front of everyone. Claire, his wife. Melissa, my sister-in-law. My brother. Not one of them said anything. No one disagreed. Claire added a laughing crying emoji. Melissa left it on read. My brother? Silence. 32 years of family dinners. Gone with one text, not a whisper of explanation. I looked down at that mug. World's Best Mom. What a cruel little joke. Then I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I stood up, walked over to the cupboard, opened a small metal box where I keep important numbers. And I picked up the landline. Yes, I still have one. I dialed a number I hadn't used in 4 years. 2 rings. Then a voice. This is Naomi. I didn't say hello. I didn't say sorry for calling so early. I just said, it happened. Naomi exhaled, a long, knowing breath. I'll be there in 2 hours. That was all. I hung up. And then I watched the light creep across my kitchen table, falling over the faded flower print, the stacked mail, the mug. There's something hollow about silence after a betrayal. Not loud, not dramatic, just still. I sat there for another minute, sipping my tea. It tasted slightly bitter, but maybe that was just me. My hands were still steady, my back still straight. I didn't call Jason, I didn't reply, but later I would count the calls. 17 by noon, 28 by sunset, 99 by the next morning. But in that moment, sitting with my tea and that message, I only thought one thing. He really thinks I'll just disappear. They think they can cut me out, like I'm some unwanted subplot in their perfect little family narrative. But what they forgot is that I am the foundation. I built the table they're eating at. I paid for the chairs they're sitting in. And I was the one who taught them how to pass the salt and say thank you, even if they forgot. So I didn't scream, didn't write a long reply. I made one call. And within 24 hours, the phones in this family would be ringing off the hook. Not out of love, not out of guilt, but because they had no idea what happens when the woman you erased was the one holding all the receipts. I didn't burn bridges. I just stopped rebuilding them. And that's when they panicked. 24 hours. 99 missed calls. And I hadn't even started yet. I stared at the group chat for a long time. I don't even know what I was waiting for. Maybe a single word. Wait, what? That's not right. Come on, Jason, she's your mother. But nothing came. Claire was the first to react. She responded to Jason's message. Don't come to family dinner. We're cutting ties. with a laughing, crying emoji. Not even words. Just that. That woman once sat in my kitchen and sobbed because she thought Jason was cheating. I made her tea. I held her hands. I told her she deserved to be loved without fear. I remember the exact mug I used. It had sunflowers on it. She said it made her feel safe. Now she was laughing at me in a group chat where every name was silent except mine. My brother, Thomas, he read the message, left no reply. Melissa, my late husband's sister, didn't even open it, or pretended not to. But I saw the little read indicators light up. One by one, no one said a word. You can learn a lot about family from the silence after a cruel message. That's when something inside me just clicked, like an old switchboard being reconnected. I walked slowly to the phone cabinet. My knees cracked, but I stood tall, opened the drawer, pulled out a small black notebook, the one I keep handwritten numbers in just in case. Naomi Weatherford. I hadn't spoken to her in 4 years, but her number was still there. Page 9. She was 23 when I met her. Her mother was my assistant back when I ran the cafe. Passed away from ovarian cancer. Naomi was in her 2nd year of law school then, lost, angry, skipping meals. She slept on my couch for 3 weeks while we figured things out. I fed her soup, printed her resumes, and told her she could change the world. Now, she was a senior partner at one of the most feared financial law firms in the Pacific Northwest. And from what I'd read, she hadn't stopped fighting. I dialed the number. 2 rings. She picked up. Tilda. I didn't say hello. I didn't ask how she'd been. I just said, "It happened." A pause. Not of confusion, but recognition. Then she let out the kind of breath you only give when you've been expecting a call for a long, long time. "You've waited too long already," she said, her voice low and steady. "It's their turn now." No questions, no delay, just a statement of truth. She'd always seen things for what they were. I whispered, "Do you still have what I sent you?" She didn't hesitate. "I've had it backed up in 3 encrypted drives since the day you gave it to me. You said to hold on to it until you called." And I had. 4 years ago, I started forwarding her documents. Quietly emails, contracts, account statements. Just in case. Just in case they ever forgot who I was. Naomi cleared her throat. "I'll be there by noon. And Tilda, get some rest this morning. We've got work to do." I set the phone down. The kitchen was quiet. Too quiet. Not the kind of quiet that soothes, but the kind that holds its breath. I stood in that silence, poured a 2nd cup of tea, and felt my spine straighten. They wanted to cut me off. Fine. They would learn what it means to sever something rooted that deep. I looked down at my mug again. The words, "World's Best Mom," now chipped and half faded. Still standing. Still here. By the time the clock struck 12:02, Naomi would walk through my door. Not as a houseguest, not as a wounded girl, but as a woman they never saw coming. And I would be ready. I used to think love was measured in what you were willing to give without being asked. That if you truly loved someone, you did things quietly, without the need for applause or even acknowledgement. I called it silent care. I wore it like a badge. For years, I told myself that being left out of the spotlight meant I was strong enough to live behind the curtain. But silence, I've learned, can also become a form of erasure. It started small, subtle. I noticed it the first time on Jason's 35th birthday. They hosted a dinner at that Italian place on Franklin Avenue, the one with the string lights and overpriced bread. Claire posted pictures, long captions about how hard Jason worked, what an incredible father he was, how grateful she was for the life we've built together. There were photos of the food, of the kids, of Jason smiling with a new watch I helped pay for. But nowhere in the captions, in the tags, in the comments, was there a mention that I was the one who footed the bill for the entire thing. Not a single "thanks, Mom." Not even a photo of me at the table. And I was there. I was the one who made the reservation, the one who picked up the cake, because Claire forgot. I even hemmed Claire's dress because the zipper kept catching. And in the end, they posted like I didn't exist. I thought maybe they were just being casual. Maybe they didn't want to clutter the post. Maybe it was nothing. But it kept happening. At Christmas, when I bought gifts for the kids, new bicycles, books, a telescope Leo had been begging for all year, Claire made a post with the caption, "Santa really outdid himself this year." When I asked Leo who he thought the presents were from, he said, "Daddy and Mommy." I said nothing. I didn't want to make it about me. On Easter, I cooked a full brunch for 12 people in their backyard. Claire uploaded a photo of the table, captioned it, "Thankful for chosen family." I wasn't tagged. Then came the cruise. They posted photos from the Mediterranean, smiling on the deck, sipping wine. Jason wearing the same sunglasses I'd wrapped in tissue paper and given him for Father's Day. Claire wrote, "We saved up for this all year, worth every penny." What she didn't say was that I had quietly transferred $5,000 into their account after Jason called me saying they were short on rent that spring. One night, I sat in my living room and scrolled back through years of their posts. Birthdays, baby showers, anniversaries. Each one a public declaration of a perfect life, a perfect couple, a perfect family. And somehow, I wasn't in any of it. I wasn't just unmentioned. I was invisible, like a stagehand who'd built the entire set, only to be asked to leave before the curtain went up. It wasn't just online. At gatherings, Claire would forget to introduce me. Jason would joke about my old school habits like writing checks or using the landline, as if I were some antique prop they hadn't gotten around to discarding. When I brought food to Leo's school fundraiser, the flyer listed Claire as the donor. When I hand-sewed a quilt for their 10th anniversary, Claire re-gifted it to her sister. And yet every time they needed something, tuition help, medical bills, down payments, I gave it. Not because I wanted leverage, not even because I thought they'd thank me, but because that's what mothers do, isn't it? We give. And when we're tired, we give again. I didn't need recognition. I told myself that over and over. I didn't need to be in their photos or their captions. Love doesn't need a stage. But lately, I've begun to wonder, if no one remembers what you gave, did you really give it? If your name is never said, did you really exist in their story? Or were you just a placeholder, a shadow on the wall? There was a time I thought invisibility was noble. Now I think maybe it's just how they train you to disappear quietly. They didn't just forget me. They edited me out, frame by frame, post by post. And I let them. Because I thought that's what love looked like. But now, with that text still sitting on my screen, glowing cold and final, I realize something else. They weren't cutting me out. They just finally said out loud what they'd been doing for years. And for the first time, I wasn't too quiet to notice. I keep a small cedar box beneath the window seat in my bedroom. It smells faintly of lemongrass and dust, like time slowed down inside it. I don't open it often, but it's there, waiting. I've never told anyone about it, not even Naomi. Inside that box live the remnants of a role I used to play, a role they no longer cast me in. The first item, a photo. Thanksgiving, maybe 7 years ago. Everyone's in the backyard, standing around the long table I painted myself. Claire's holding baby Leo. Jason has one arm around her and the other tossing a peace sign. The cousins are laughing. Even Melissa's dog made it in. But I'm not there. Not because I wasn't present. No. I remember standing just behind Jason, holding the cranberry pie, waiting for them to say, "Come on, Mom, get in the shot." They never did. Claire said, "Let's just take one real quick before the food gets cold." I stepped back, smiled. No one turned around. And yet, when I looked closer at the printed photo, there was a blur on the edge. The curve of a plate I was holding, the sleeve of my cardigan, a half shadow where I once stood. I folded the photo and placed it in the box. The second item, a drawing. Leo made it when he was 5. It was titled My Family. Stick figures in a house. Jason, Claire, baby Lily in a pink scribble, even their golden retriever Biscuit. There was a figure outside the house, smaller in gray next to a flower pot. "That's Grandma," he had said proudly. I smiled so wide my cheeks ached. But Claire glanced at the paper and said, "Oh, we probably don't need this one. It's messy." She folded it, tossed it toward the trash bin, then moved on. After they left, I picked it out of the recycling, smoothed it carefully, and tucked it into the cedar box. Leo had drawn me outside the house, yes, but he still saw me. That mattered. Third, a birthday card. It was unopened, still sealed, addressed to me in Melissa's handwriting. It came 4 years ago, the year after Paul passed. On the back, someone had scribbled, "Sorry, forgot to drop this off." It arrived in May. My birthday is in February. I never opened it, not out of anger, but because something inside me didn't want to know if the words had been rushed, an obligation scrawled between errands. Sometimes, what hurts most isn't what they say. It's how little effort they make when they pretend to care. I placed it in the box, alongside a napkin with Claire's lipstick, a menu from our last family dinner, and a piece of wrapping paper Jason tore off a gift I'd bought him. These things, so small, so easy to throw away, had become my evidence. Not of what they did, but of how easily I vanished from their frame. You see, erasure doesn't happen all at once. It happens quietly, patiently. It's the birthday call that never comes, the name that's left off the RSVP, the way they say our family and mean everyone but you. I used to believe love didn't need to be loud, that the deepest care was the kind that left no footprint. But now I realize, love doesn't erase. Love remembers. Love keeps you in the photo. Love notices the figure outside the house and brings them in. I've been collecting proof, not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed to remind myself that I wasn't crazy, that I was there. I did show up, again and again. That cedar box, it holds everything they left out, everything they didn't post, didn't tag, didn't say. It's not bitterness that fills it. It's memory, mine. They may have forgotten, but I remember. And now, so will they. The knock on my door came at exactly 12:02. Naomi had always been punctual. She said it was a form of respect, especially for those who raised her. I opened the door and saw her standing there, black suit sharp as a blade, a leather satchel in one hand, and a faint, familiar smile on her face. She hadn't changed much, though her eyes held more weight now, like a woman who'd sat across from liars too many times and learned how to recognize the tremble behind every smooth voice. She didn't say, "Hello." She just stepped inside, set her bag on the dining table, and said, "Let's see what you've got." I went to the drawer under the bookshelf and pulled out a folder I'd labeled with one word: roots. Naomi raised an eyebrow. "Interesting choice." I handed it to her. "Because they grew everything from this. And now they want to chop me off like I was never part of the tree." She didn't say anything, just opened the folder. Inside were 4 years' worth of statements, records, contracts, most of them with sticky notes in my neat cursive. I'd been careful, quiet, but thorough. Claire always thought I was just old-fashioned for keeping paper copies. Truth is, I never trusted digital alone, not when silence could be deleted with one click. Naomi's eyes scanned quickly. She was fast, methodical. Every few pages, she nodded, murmured, "Good," or underlined something. Then she paused at one document and looked up at me. "You still hold full power of attorney over Jason's name on the family property?" I nodded. Since Paul passed, Jason never rescinded it, never even asked. She whistled low. "And the beach house?" "Bought in my name," I replied. "I just let them live there." Naomi smirked. "And the account for the kids' education fund?" "My name," I said simply. "I only gave them viewing access." Her eyes met mine. "They have no idea, do they?" I shook my head. "Not a clue. They think because I sit quiet at the table, I don't know how to hold a pen." She pulled out the trust documents next. I'd created a small charitable trust in Paul's memory 3 years ago, one that quietly owned shares in his original auto repair franchise. The dividends went into funding scholarships for underprivileged youth. Jason had signed the approval papers at the time, thinking it was just a memorial gesture. I'd never corrected him. Naomi tapped the edge of the page. "This right here is your earthquake. You've got leverage in every direction: property, cash, legacy." She closed the folder and looked at me again, not with pity, but something stronger: respect. "They tried to erase you," she said, her voice low. "But they forgot who wrote the first chapter." I didn't smile. I just reached for the kettle and poured us both tea. From the same pot Claire once said was too old-fashioned to bring out for guests. Naomi took a sip. "So, what do you want to do, Tilda?" I looked out the window. The bird feeder swung gently in the wind. Cardinals came in pairs, like always. "I don't want revenge," I said quietly. "I want memory. I want them to remember who held this family together when no one else would. I want them to feel the silence they gave me, but this time, feel it for real." Naomi leaned back. Then we let them come to the dinner. I frowned. "They told me not to." She smiled. "Exactly. Let's make sure they remember that text. In front of people who matter." I didn't answer right away, but in that moment, something settled. For the first time in years, I didn't feel erased. I felt composed, prepared. They had sent a message. I had answered, not with shouting, not with begging, with records, with ink, with law, the same way I raised Jason, quietly, patiently, completely. Now they would learn what it meant to be written out, and what it means when the author picks up the pen again. Naomi set her teacup down, her gaze fixed on me, not probing, not judging, just steady. "They thought you were weak," she said, "but they don't know. You could rewrite the whole game." I didn't answer right away. I stared at the faint steam curling from my cup, my hands wrapped around it like I needed its warmth to keep breathing. "I'm not fighting them," I finally said, not looking up. "I'm just done being quiet. Naomi gave a small, approving nod. There were no applause lines between us, no dramatic gasps, just quiet understanding. She reached for her phone. "So," she said gently, "when do you want the family meeting?" I looked at her. "Where?" She smiled. "Someplace they can't crop you out." And just like that, Naomi called in a favor from a private lakefront restaurant in Fairhaven, the same place Jason once told Claire was too old school for their wedding anniversary. They'd forgotten, but I hadn't. I was the one who had helped the owners renovate it years ago. Back then, the chef was a young man who got his start from a small scholarship, one funded by the charity I built in Paul's name. "Dinner's set for Sunday," Naomi said, locking the time in her calendar. "And this time, you're not waiting for an invitation." I almost laughed. Claire's going to think I've lost my mind. "Good," Naomi replied. "Let her. That's how she'll know you've changed." I walked over to the bookshelf and opened a drawer beneath it. From the very back, I retrieved an old letter, folded 3 times, soft at the edges. It was from Jason, written when he was 17. In it, he'd said I was the only one who believed in him when he didn't even believe in himself. I held it for a moment, reading those words with eyes that now saw through a different lens. Not pain, not regret, just clarity. "I used to be the foundation," I murmured. "Now they've remodeled the house and acted like I was never there." Naomi was already jotting notes in her legal pad, timelines, clauses, key documents. "Sunday won't be about drama," she said. "It'll be about truth. Calm, controlled truth, just enough to remind them who authored the lives they now live." I nodded slowly. "I'm not trying to destroy anyone." "I know," she said. "That's why you're the one holding the real power." Still, a flicker of doubt stirred inside me. What if they don't care about the truth, Naomi? What if they only care about the assets? She met my eyes, voice low. "Then they're about to learn that you are the asset." We organized every folder, property deeds, signed authorizations, bank statements, trust documents. But we also made another list, the things I wouldn't say, because silence, when chosen, not forced, becomes power. As Naomi zipped her briefcase shut, she glanced back at me. "Sunday won't be a war, Tilda. It'll be a reckoning." And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like someone on the outside, waiting for the door to open. I felt anchored. All those years I'd stayed quiet so no one would feel awkward. All those times I'd smiled while my name was left off the guest list. All those dinners I cooked in the background while photos were taken without me. None of it was forgotten. None of it erased. They thought silence meant surrender. But they forgot that I was the one who built the house. I simply stopped asking to be let back in. Now I was opening a different door. Not to fight, not to shout, but to be seen. And they would. The first call came in at 8:04 a.m. Jason. I watched the screen light up, vibrating once on the kitchen counter beside my tea. I didn't answer. I didn't even reach for the phone. By 8:16, it rang again. Then again at 8:23. Then Claire called, twice, back to back, before switching to a stream of increasingly desperate texts. It had begun. The night before, Naomi filed the revocation of financial access on all accounts under my name. The house, the trust, the business shares. Nothing illegal, nothing dramatic. Just boundaries. Corrected. Claire's first text read, "Hi, Tilda. Is there a problem with the utilities? We couldn't access the Beach House app this morning." At 9:12, Jason left a voicemail. His voice sounded casual, like a man pretending nothing had changed. Hey, Mom, just wanted to check if the Wi-Fi's down or something. Claire can't log into the bank portal. No big deal. Call me when you can. At 10:03, he wasn't pretending anymore. Did you change the account passwords? Mom, this isn't funny. By noon, it escalated into panic. What is going on? The lawyer says the property deed's been restricted. You can't just... Mom, pick up the phone. Pick. Upper. The... damn. Phone. I counted 17 missed calls from Jason by lunchtime. Claire had sent a string of half apologies, half accusations. My favorite was, if this is about the dinner thing, I'm sorry. We didn't mean to exclude you. It was just a misunderstanding. Please. Can we talk? I read that one twice. I almost responded. Almost. But instead, I opened a fresh note on my phone, typed 3 words, then copied them into a reply. Message received. Goodbye. Then I turned my phone off. I went out to the garden and pulled weeds. The sky was overcast, the breeze still. A mourning dove watched from the fence post while I crouched by the hydrangeas, fingers deep in the dirt, grounding myself. For 23 years, I'd answered every call, every, Mom, can you? Every, would you mind? I'd written checks with no questions, covered their mistakes with quiet grace. But no one asked if I was okay when my hip ached, or when I sat alone at Christmas dinner with the food I still cooked, even when no one came. This time, I would not explain. I would not soothe. I would not clean up after the mess they made by forgetting me. By 4 p.m., Naomi texted, "They're scrambling." Jason's lawyer called twice. Claire emailed me with a new subject line every hour. They're terrified. I didn't smile, but I felt something inside me steady. Like I'd been gripping the edge of a cliff for years and finally found solid ground beneath my feet. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my memory box. Inside were things no one had seen in years. A photo of baby Jason asleep on my chest. Claire's first thank you note for the wedding fund before she stopped writing a single crayon drawing labeled Grandma's House, with no grandma in sight. I lit a candle, placed the box beside it, and sat in stillness. They weren't just calling because they missed me. They were calling because they missed control. They had lost their access, not just to the money, to the version of me who'd kept quiet. At 10:42 p.m., Jason texted again. "Please, just call me. I'm sorry. Please don't do this." I turned my phone back on, only to see 99 missed calls. 99. And I still didn't call back, because I finally understood something I wish I'd learned sooner. Silence is not weakness when it is chosen. It is power. Jason was 18 when the accident happened. Rainy night. Country road. Too fast on a bend. I remember every sound from that night, the phone ringing at 2:11 a.m., the shatter in the nurse's voice when she said my son's name. I didn't hesitate. I didn't wait for Paul to wake up. I grabbed my coat and drove through that storm like God himself couldn't stop me. Jason had a concussion, broken collarbone, and 2 fractured ribs. But it wasn't the injuries that haunted me. It was the look in his eyes when I walked into that hospital room. Eyes so full of pain and relief and a desperate child's belief that the world had just realigned because his mother showed up. "You came," he whispered. Of course I did. I was always the one who came. I slept in a stiff vinyl chair for 3 nights straight, only getting up to gently sponge his forehead or beg the nurses for another ice pack. Paul said I was coddling him too much. Claire, just a friend back then, never even visited. But Jason called me his miracle. He told everyone he got better because I never left. He said, "When I woke up and saw you there, I knew I wasn't going to die." That memory used to warm me. Now it sits like cold stone in my chest. Because the same boy who once clung to me like a lifeline is now a man who clicked remove from group without blinking. The same hands I held through 4 needles sent me a text that read, "We're cutting ties." I don't know when he started rewriting our history, when my presence became inconvenient instead of comforting, when my love became a transaction they assumed would never dry up. But I remember that hospital room. I remember holding his hand in the dark when he woke up crying from phantom pain. He was just a boy then, scared and broken, and I had whispered, "I will always be where you fall." I didn't know back then that one day he'd push me down to climb higher. Didn't know that always had an expiration date. Naomi asked me once, "Why did you never bring that up? Why didn't you remind him of all you did?" Because love, real love, doesn't keep score. It doesn't show receipts. It just shows up. But I'm learning. When love is unacknowledged long enough, it hardens. When kindness is mistaken for weakness, silence becomes survival. So now I sit here, tea cooling beside me, staring out the window where the wind bends the trees, and I think of that hospital bed. I think of Jason's voice, so small, saying, "You came." And I whisper into the quiet room, "Yes, I did, and you forgot." The pain isn't sharp anymore. It's dull, like a weight you get used to carrying. And the cruelest part? I'd still show up. If he needed me again, some part of me would still pack that coat, drive through the storm, sit by his side. But this time, he'd open his eyes and see the space where I used to be. And maybe, just maybe, he'd finally feel what absence really means. The message came at 7:08 p.m., just as I was folding the linen napkins for tomorrow's dinner. It was from Leo, my grandson, Jason, and Claire's boy. 17, sharp as a tack, a little too quiet for his own good. He'd always sat near me at family dinners, when they still invited me, asking questions about old books, planting tomatoes, how to make real cornbread, instead of the box mix Claire favored. His text was short, hesitant. "Grandma, did you really ruin the family? Dad said you froze everything and went after him, that you're trying to hurt us." I sat down, slowly. The words didn't sting as much as I thought they would. Maybe because they weren't cruel, just searching. He wasn't attacking. He was asking. That's the thing about children. They echo what they're told. But some part of them still wants to know what's real. I took a deep breath, reached for the manila folder I kept in the cedar box by the bookshelf, the one labeled Jason, June 2021. Inside, a scanned copy of the financial authorization Jason signed. 3 years ago. His own signature, neat and practiced. He had asked me to co-sign so he and Claire could refinance their second mortgage after their boutique failed. Said they were a few months behind, but would repay everything in full once their new venture took off. Spoiler, it never did. I covered the difference quietly. No questions asked, like I always had. That document had sat untouched until last week, when Naomi asked if I had anything written. She blinked in disbelief when I handed over an entire binder. Now I attached the PDF to my reply. No emotion, no explanation, just facts. Then I typed, "Dear Leo, the truth doesn't need anyone to defend it. It just needs the chance to be seen. Love, Grandma." I pressed send, then closed the folder. My hands didn't shake. A few minutes later, Leo replied, "He never told us you paid off the loan. He said you were angry, vindictive." I didn't respond to that one right away. Not because I didn't have words, but because I didn't want to teach him bitterness by accident. I stood up, walked to the old secretary desk, and opened a drawer that hadn't been touched in years. Inside was the only birthday card Leo ever made by hand. He was 8. It said, "To Grandma, who grows the best tomatoes and never gets mad." I traced my finger over his crooked handwriting. He didn't remember the card, but I did. I remembered everything. Another message buzzed. "Are you coming to dinner tomorrow?" I paused and typed, "Yes. But I'm not coming to fight. I'm coming to finish a story that's been told without my pages." He read it instantly. 3 dots blinked for a long time. Then nothing. I didn't mind. That night, I brewed chamomile tea and lit the candle on the windowsill. The wind outside was loud, branches scraping the glass like fingers trying to get in. For years, I'd told myself that silence was the nobler road, that love meant never making anyone uncomfortable with the truth. But all silence had given me was erasure. Leo's question, "Did you ruin the family?" wasn't just his. It was the question I'd asked myself every night since that first text from Jason. And now, finally, I had my answer. No, I didn't destroy the family. I just stopped hiding the cracks they begged me to cover. It was past midnight when the call came. The screen lit up in the darkness beside my bed. Leo. Video call. I hesitated. My first instinct was to let it ring, but something about that name, something about that child who used to chase butterflies in my backyard and fall asleep with his head on my lap. I answered. The screen flickered to life. Leo's face was dimly lit, messy hair, eyes red, like he hadn't slept either. "Hi, Grandma," he said, voice quiet. "Sorry it's late." I smiled. Time doesn't matter for people who still want the truth. My voice sounded calmer than I felt. He looked at me for a long second, then finally asked, "Do you regret it?" "Regret what, sweetheart?" He swallowed. "Loving them. Giving so much. Dad said you were too generous, that you did things just to hold it over people's heads, that you used money like a chain." I could feel my chest tighten, but not from anger, from grief, from the slow erosion of years poured into people who misunderstood love as leverage. "I don't regret loving them," I said softly. "I never will." I leaned forward so he could see my face clearly. But this time, I choose to love with boundaries, not chains, not silence, and certainly not with blank checks. Leo blinked. "I just don't get it. Why now?" I took a breath, the kind of breath that carries a whole decade behind it. Because I was always taught that love meant sacrifice, that to be a good mother, a good wife, a good grandmother, you give, you cover, you make excuses. And I believed that. I really did. I paused, letting the silence stretch between us. Not heavy, just honest. But here's what I never learned until too late. When you teach people that your needs don't matter, they start to believe it. And when they believe it long enough, they stop asking if you're okay. They stop remembering you altogether. Leo looked down. "I think that's what happened to you." "Yes," I said simply. "That's what happened to me." He was quiet again. Then, like the boy I once knew, he asked, "But don't you miss us?" That was the question. The raw one. The one with the knife tucked inside it. I miss the versions of you that remembered who I was. I miss birthdays, where your dad used to make me laugh with silly cards. I miss the first Thanksgiving when Claire helped me set the table and we danced in the kitchen. I miss who we all were before forgetting became convenient. Leo blinked away, a tear. I didn't know about the loan, or the trust, or any of that. I know you didn't, I said. That's why I'm not angry at you. That's why I answered this call. He nodded. So what happens now? I thought for a moment, then said, now I live my life. I go to the farmer's market on Saturdays. I water my herbs. I write letters I never send. And I stop waiting for invitations from people who forgot how to say thank you. Leo whispered, I didn't forget. That made something inside me break, gently, like a window opened after a long winter. I know you didn't, I said, my voice catching. And that's why this call matters. He stared at me again, then said, I want to visit you, if that's okay. I nodded, trying to hold back everything that wanted to spill over. Only if we make tomato soup from scratch. None of that canned stuff. He grinned. Deal. The call ended a few minutes later, but I stayed sitting in the glow of the screen, hands folded over my robe, heart full, not because I won anything, but because I finally chose myself, and still, love found its way back. I wasn't watching the live stream when it happened. Naomi was. She sent me the link with one sentence. It's starting. Claire was on screen, tears spilling perfectly down her cheekbones, mascara running just enough to seem unscripted. She was wearing her cashmere wrap, the one Jason bought her for their anniversary. And behind her, the fireplace flickered like a studio light. Her voice cracked at just the right moments. I didn't want to go public, she sniffled, but the silence hurts more. I just want people to know what it's like living with a toxic mother-in-law. Someone who manipulates with money, who punishes us for wanting independence. She paused, inhaling dramatically. We begged her to just let us live, to stop interfering. But instead, she froze our accounts, cut us off, left our children confused and hurt. I mean, who does that to family? Naomi muted the video and raised an eyebrow at me. Who indeed? She said dryly. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Because the same Claire who cried about being financially destroyed by a vindictive matriarch had just posted a carousel of smiling photos at a 5-star restaurant in downtown Charleston, captioned, Crisis dinner with my tribe, family over everything. Lobster tail, Wagyu steak, 3-tiered dessert, Jason raising a glass, Claire laughing mid-bite, Leo conspicuously missing. The comments came quickly. Some were sympathetic, echoing her pain. But then someone noticed the contradiction. Didn't you just say you were cut off? That Wagyu looks pretty affordable for a victim. Toxic mill? But I remember your Mother's Day post 2 years ago. Didn't she pay for your shop launch? Claire, you literally tagged the restaurant. Kind of kills the we're struggling vibe. And then came the screenshots. People digging through old posts, resurfacing receipts. Mother's Day gifts from Tilda. The down payment celebration toast. A check partially visible in Jason's hand. The narrative unraveled in real time, not with rage or scandal, but with quiet clicks, side-by-side photos, and subtle truths that refused to stay buried. Naomi looked at me again. You didn't even have to lift a finger. I sipped my tea. It was still warm. I didn't want revenge, I said. I just wanted them to stop rewriting the story. And that's the strange thing about truth. It doesn't shout. It doesn't scream. It waits, calm, patient, still, until someone finally looks close enough. By the end of the night, Claire had disabled comments. Her story, literally, vanished. But screenshots don't disappear. Neither does integrity. I didn't gloat, didn't send a message, didn't reply when Jason texted, "This is getting out of hand," because for once, it wasn't my hands turning the wheel. It was consequence. The next morning, the doorbell rang. It was Leo, holding tulips, eyes red from more than just screen fatigue. "Can we talk?" he asked. I opened the door. Not because I wanted to reopen old wounds, but because the ones who are willing to see, to ask, to listen, they deserve a seat at the table, even if the table looks different now, even if some chairs stay empty. It was Naomi's idea to include the clause 4 years ago when she drew up the legal structure for the family trust. I remember asking her, "Do you think it's necessary?" And she, with her usual calm foresight, said, "Only if you believe people change when no one's watching." She was right. People don't change. They reveal. The clause allowed for a full asset review if at any point the beneficiaries were found to be acting in bad faith toward the trustee, in this case, me. It had never been invoked, until now. Naomi activated it quietly. No announcement, no threats, no letters, just a series of emails sent to the necessary financial firms and title offices. Within 48 hours, Jason received the first notification. Account temporarily suspended, pending review. Then, the second. We are conducting a compliance audit related to the Harper Warren Family Trust. By the end of the week, the following were flagged. The deed to the beach house. A joint investment portfolio Claire had siphoned from the luxury SUV. Jason drove daily, technically registered to the trust, and the emergency fund, 6 figures, meant for Leo's education, which Jason had borrowed against without disclosure. Jason's email to me was frantic. His voicemail, panicked. His last text read, "Mom, please, I didn't mean to cut ties. That was Claire. She wrote that. I was just angry. I didn't mean any of it. You're my mother." I stared at those words for a long time. Not because I didn't believe him, but because belief is different from trust. And trust, once broken quietly, cannot be repaired loudly. He showed up at my door the next afternoon, his hair uncombed, shirt wrinkled. The old Jason, my Jason, peeking out beneath the man who forgot, who held his hand after every surgery, who held his dignity after every failure. He didn't come with flowers. He didn't come with apologies rehearsed by lawyers. He just stood there and said, "I messed up, Mom." I thought I was protecting my family, but I forgot who built the ground we all stood on. I looked at him, really looked. The boy I raised. The man who forgot my birthday 3 years in a row. The son who let silence be louder than loyalty. "I didn't mean to cut you out," he whispered. And finally, I answered, "You did, Jason. You did mean it. Maybe not forever, maybe not fully, but you meant it enough to press send." He opened his mouth, but I raised my hand. "You made a choice. You cut ties. I'm not punishing you. I'm just stepping back. You chose distance. I'm simply honoring it." His eyes welled. "You're my mother. You're supposed to forgive." "I did," I said quietly. "Every time you didn't show up. Every time you took and forgot to say thank you. Every time you let Claire turn rooms I paid for into spaces I wasn't welcome. I forgave it all." He looked stunned, and maybe that was the real wound. Not that I had turned cold, but that I had grown still. "I'm not asking for money," he said. "I know," I replied. "And that's why I'm letting Naomi do what needs to be done. Not out of anger, but out of structure, out of clarity." He sat down on the front step, the same step he once tripped over at age 5. The same one I painted blue, because it reminded me of his favorite crayon. And I didn't sit beside him. I just stood in the doorway. A quiet reminder. I was still here, but in a different way now. He left after an hour, didn't slam the door, didn't say goodbye. But that night, for the first time in a long time, I slept without dreaming of apologies that would never come. It came in a plain envelope. No return address, just my name written in Jason's handwriting. Slanted, neat, like when he used to label his science fair posters in 6th grade. Naomi placed it on the table beside my tea. "Do you want me to read it first?" she asked. I shook my head. Some things, no matter how late, have to be read by the person they were meant for. I opened it slowly. The first page was blank, save for the heading. To the only woman who ever stayed when everyone else left. That alone made my hands tremble. The rest was a long, unpolished letter. No dramatic punctuation. No excuses dressed as insight. Just truth. Raw and unedited. He wrote about fear, about pride, about how, somewhere along the way, he mistook dependence for weakness and autonomy for silence. About how Claire made him feel like a man, but I had made him a man. He didn't ask for money. He didn't beg for restoration. He just asked for a start. If I could prove myself, like a stranger might, would you let me try again? As a son who knows better. I closed the letter and stared at the grain of the table. That table had known everything. Arguments, laughter, empty plates from Sunday dinners, bills I paid without question, birthday cakes no one asked me to bake. Now it held an apology that came without expectation. Naomi refilled my tea. "So, do you forgive him?" I exhaled, not from exhaustion, from recognition. Forgiveness used to be instinct for me. Automatic, expected. People hurt, I forgave. People forgot me, I remembered them anyway. I thought that was love. I thought that was strength. But now, I don't know if forgiveness is the right word, I told her. I'm not angry anymore. I just won't hand out clean slates like spare napkins. She nodded, understanding. Then I did something no one saw coming. I went to my old file cabinet, the bottom drawer, pulled out a folder labeled Warren Foundation, Intern Protocol. Inside was a blank application form, the same one I used to give young men and women trying to prove themselves, trying to be trusted with something meaningful. I placed it in a fresh envelope. No note, just the form. Naomi blinked. "Is that?" "Yes," I smiled. "If he wants to start again, he can apply, like everyone else." "But he's your son." "Exactly," I said. "Which means he should be the first to know. Dignity isn't inherited. It's earned." I mailed it that evening. Not with spite, but with structure. Not with malice, but with memory. Because I remembered every time I forgave too quickly, every time I let someone cut corners in the name of love, and every time it came back to me, not as gratitude, but entitlement. This time, the door would still be open, but he'd have to knock, and maybe even wait. Not because I needed to punish, but because he needed to rebuild from the outside in. That night, I lit a candle and read his letter one more time. And for the first time, I noticed something. He signed it not, "Your son," but "Jason, hoping to be your son again." I didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, but because something deeper had arrived. A sense of peace that only comes when you finally understand. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, and love isn't always letting go of consequences. Sometimes, love is letting someone feel the weight of rebuilding the bridge they burned, and watching quietly, if they truly will. It was just after 6 p.m. when I heard the knock. Not hurried, not hesitant, just familiar. I opened the door to find Leo standing there, holding something under his arm. He looked older than his 17 years. Maybe it was the way his eyes had changed, like he was learning to see things he hadn't been taught to notice. "I brought something," he said. "Can I come in?" "Always," I replied. He followed me to the kitchen, setting the thick, leather-bound book on the table. It was our family album, the one that used to sit on the living room shelf, the one I hadn't seen in years. He flipped it open gently. "I found it in Dad's garage. Thought maybe we could look through it together." Page 1. Jason as a toddler, frosting on his cheeks. Claire at their engagement party, beaming. Baby Leo in a blue onesie, asleep on his father's chest. We turned page after page. Birthdays, beach trips, Christmas mornings, and in all of them, I wasn't there. Not once. Not in the background, not in a corner, not even a blurred silhouette caught by accident. Leo looked confused. "You're not in any of these, Grandma." I smiled, but not from joy, from recognition. "No," I said, "I wouldn't be." He frowned. "Why not?" I tapped the edge of one photo, Claire cutting the turkey, Jason pouring wine. "Because I took that picture." His brow furrowed. I turned another page. "And that one, and that, and probably every other photo you see in here." He went quiet. I placed a hand over his. "The person behind the camera never ends up in the frame, Leo. The one who sets the table rarely gets a seat. The one who holds the light rarely gets seen in it." He looked at me for a long time. Then, "But why did you do it, Grandma? Why did you keep giving, even when they didn't?" I looked out the window. The sky was fading into lavender. A quiet dusk, the kind that reminded me of early dinners and folded napkins. "Because I thought that's what love meant," I said softly. "Being the one who stays behind to clean up. The one who makes sure everyone's warm before she takes off her coat." He turned another page. This time, it was a photo of him on his 5th birthday. Face lit up, cake halfway to his mouth. "I don't remember this," he whispered. I smiled again. "You were too happy to remember. That's the gift." Then he closed the album. "What about now?" he asked. "Who's behind the camera now?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached into the drawer and pulled out a small instant camera, worn but working. I set it on the table. "You are," I told him. "From now on, maybe you get to hold it. Maybe you start noticing who's missing. And maybe you make sure they're not." He blinked fast. Then he said, "Can I take your picture?" I laughed gently. "I don't think I'm very photogenic anymore." He raised the camera anyway. "No, you're just finally in the light." The shutter clicked, a soft whir as the photo printed and slid out. We waited in silence while it developed, and when it did, he handed it to me. For the first time in a very long time, I saw myself. Centered. Clear. Present. He stood up to leave, taking the album with him. "Can I come again tomorrow?" "Bring another page," I said. "I've got more stories than this book has room for." He grinned, and for a brief second, I saw Jason at that same age, that same spark. After he left, I placed the photo on the fridge, right next to the old magnet that read, "World's Best Mom." And I whispered to no one in particular. Sometimes, the frame just needed adjusting. The kettle whistled just as the sky softened into pale gold. I moved slowly, the way I always did in the mornings, measured steps, soft slippers, one hand brushing the counter like I was reminding the house I was still here. The tea leaves had steeped just long enough. Earl Grey today, with a hint of lavender. I liked how it reminded me that strength could still be fragrant. I sat at the table, my usual spot facing the window. The ceramic mug warmed both my palms, and beside it, face down and vibrating, my phone. I didn't rush to pick it up. I let it buzz until it stopped. Then, one by one, the alerts appeared on the lock screen. Jason. Again. Again. 17 missed calls, a few texts, one voice message. I didn't listen. Instead, I turned the phone over, pressed and held. Delete all. No hesitation, no drama, just quiet. Because some stories don't need loud endings. Some chapters don't require confrontation or explanation. They just need to close. I took a slow sip. The tea had cooled slightly. It was perfect. There was a time, not so long ago, when I would have stared at that phone for hours, wondered what he wanted, whether he meant it, whether I should respond, whether silence made me cruel. But not anymore. Now I understood. Silence isn't cruelty, it's clarity. It's choosing peace over chaos, dignity over drama. It's the sound a door makes when it closes. Softly. I looked around the room. The framed photo of Leo and me from the week before sat on the mantel, right next to the one Naomi took of us on the courthouse steps, smiling. Two women who had once saved each other at different points in life. That was my family now. Not perfect, not bound by blood or obligation, but chosen, present, rooted in truth. I thought about the phrase Jason used in that message that started it all. We're cutting ties. I smiled at the irony now. Ties don't get cut in one direction. What he didn't realize was I had been holding that rope for years, holding it while it burned, letting it fray little by little, hoping he'd reach for it before it snapped. But the day he let go was the day I realized I didn't need to hold on anymore either. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. And that surprised me. I just was, still, safe, seen. Naomi once told me, sometimes healing looks like not answering the phone. She was right, because forgiveness doesn't always wear the costume of reconciliation. Sometimes it wears slippers and holds a tea mug. Sometimes it deletes a number and doesn't replace it with another. I looked out the window. The sun had just peeked over the hedge. Birds chirped like no one had ever broken their heart. I reached for my pen and wrote in my journal, a habit I'd started in the quiet years. Today, I chose quiet again, and in that quiet, I found myself. Then I closed the book, set it beside my tea, and breathed. It was Naomi who told me first. The call came in just after lunch. My gardening gloves were still damp with earth, and the tulip bulbs had only half disappeared into the soil. Her voice was calm, but warm, like she'd been holding back until the timing felt right. They said yes, she said. It's happening. The documentary is greenlit. I didn't respond right away, just brushed the soil off my palms and looked toward the sky. Some clouds were forming, soft and slow, like applause from above, reluctant but inevitable. Naomi continued, the title is locked too. They want to call it The Mother Erased from the Family Table. I let the words sit in the air between us. Not banned, not abandoned, not even betrayed. Erased. It was accurate, painfully so, but also strangely freeing. I heard her breathing on the other end. I wanted to check with you, she added gently, before we sign. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. It's okay, I said. I think it's time. She hesitated. Are you sure? I'm not interested in hurting anyone, I said. I just want to make invisible things visible. She exhaled. Then let's make that happen. We hung up. That night, Leo came by with a bag of groceries and 2 small tubs of ice cream. He knew my favorites now. He was the one who brought it up. Naomi had told him too. He set the ice cream on the table, then turned to me, eyes searching. "Are you happy, Grandma?" The question felt heavier than usual, not because of the documentary, but because of who he was and who I had once been. I sat down beside him and thought about it for a moment. Happiness used to mean something very different to me, I said slowly. It used to mean being included, being invited, being named. He looked at me, waited. But now, I continued, it means watching someone walk in their truth, with their head high and no need to explain. That's enough for me. He nodded. "You're talking about Naomi." I smiled. "Naomi, and you." He blinked. "You both found me in the quiet. Not when I shouted, not when I begged, but when I just existed." He looked down at the spoon in his hand. "You don't want a seat at the family dinner anymore?" I shook my head gently. I spent so many years cooking meals I was never invited to eat, polishing silverware for people who barely remembered my name. Now? I've set a new table. I gestured to the garden through the window. New buds forming along the trellis, soft rows of green pushing through dark soil. "I serve here now," I said, "to people who see me." Leo smiled softly. "And if people ask about the film?" he asked. "If they say it's one-sided or bitter?" I chuckled. "Then they haven't been listening." I paused, then added, "This isn't a story about bitterness. It's about boundaries. It's not about revenge. It's about recognition." He looked out at the garden with me. "It's beautiful, Grandma." I squeezed his hand. "Sometimes," I whispered, "you don't need a chair at their table. Sometimes you just need your own patch of sunlight." We sat in silence a while longer. Then he took a picture. Not posed, just me with the garden in the background, holding my cup of tea. He said he'd print it. I hope he does, because I want to remember this moment, not for what I lost, but for what I reclaimed. The house felt warmer that evening, not because of the heat, but because, for the first time in a long time, every person inside had chosen to be there. Not out of guilt, not out of blood, but because love had stopped being invisible